But listen up, fellas, because today we got a new Manscaped product alert. Manscaped just released the Weed Whacker nose and ear hair trimmer. So take a look in the mirror. I guarantee you'll see hair sticking out of those holes. It's time to keep your ear and nose hair looking as nice as your clean-shaven area down there with that Lawnmower 3.0. Now, it's well documented on this program, Ken Flo. We have both had our noses waxed. I've had it done professionally. You've done it at home. It's not pleasant. It feels like they're ripping your nose off your face. But now Manscaped changing the grooming game again with this Weed Whacker, just like the Lawnmower proprietary skin-safe technology, helps prevent nicks, snags, and tugs in those delicate holes. Intelligent contoured design enhances the trimming experience. It's also waterproof, which makes for easy operation and cleaning. Manscaped making whacking your weeds a time to look forward to, delivering maximum confidence while also providing hygiene. And folks, 79% of partners polled admitted that long nose hair is a major turnoff. It's time to upgrade your Manscaped routine with the Weed Whacker. So for listeners of the Anik and Florian podcast, you can get 20% off and free shipping with the code AF at manscaped.com right now. 20% off with free shipping at manscaped.com and use code AF. What are you waiting for? Go whack your weeds. All right, let's get to Ray Longo and the Ray Longo Minute.
It's now time for the Ray Longo Minute.
I want you to punch a hole in his fucking chest. That's what I want.
The Ray Longo Minute.
Starring Ray Longo. The John Anik and Kenny Florian podcast.
Always a pleasure to be joined by the great Raymond Peter Longo, who has gone away with the hat this week so we can see that beautiful dark brown lettuce in all its glory. My word.
And we're just going to, I think we're going to cut it now. I'm so mad that Frivola didn't get the fight. We had another huge parade.
I thought you might have it. Yeah.
Out of sympathy for that whole thing, I shaved my grub off, but I left the hair. So another week and I clean up, Kenny.
And that's not a halo over. I mean, that's not a light over his head. That's a halo.
Yeah.
There's no light in that office. It's the angels are singing over his hair.
You like how I position that, right?
Yeah. Beautiful.
All right. So word came down middle of the week that Matt Frivola was out of his fight with Frank Camacho. It was a fight that a lot of people were looking forward to. And, of course, you saw Justin James go out and knock out Frank Camacho. So that probably was hard for Matt Frivola to watch. But a guy who we all absolutely love, Billy Quarantillo, who had fought on May 30th, who was there to corner Matt Frivola, tested positive twice for COVID-19. And so Frivola, despite 2 negative tests, was not able to compete. Man, you got to feel for Frivola, man. I mean, he's had a couple fights go away now, Ray, since COVID intervened. And he's a good dude who deserves to continue his momentum, but these circumstances keep getting in the way.
Yeah, no, that was a horrible thing. And, I spoke to both of those guys, and Billy he felt great. The kid fought 2 weeks ago. Then he trained with Frivola for this fight. So whether he has it or he doesn't have it, or, he tested, he said it definitely felt great and it didn't affect his training at all. So I don't know. I think there's still a lot of unanswered questions about all of this stuff, but hope we get to the bottom of it, sooner rather than later. And just unfortunate because, again, he kind of moved his camp to Florida just so he could train because they had, a little less restricted than we were.
Right.
And he did everything he could. He wanted that fight. He wanted, any fight, to be honest with you. And just kind of, that shit sucks, man. We got the word his father called me, I think, Thursday night. And he thought it was going to happen. I think a couple of doctors said it was okay. And then I guess they had to reach out to somebody else and they squashed it. So unfortunate, but I'm sure he'll be back. And, look, after looking at that too, hats off to James for jumping in there and seizing the opportunity. I think that would have been a great fight for Frivola. And, man, we could have had the hat trick. That's what I'm thinking.
I know.
That's what I'm thinking, man. 3 in a row. That would have been great.
Kenny,
I had the troops all lined up, and I had to cut them short right at the end.
Right, yeah.
Horrible.
Parade canceled, man.
Yeah.
Kenny, I feel badly for Frivola, of course, but I feel really badly for Billy Q. I mean, could you imagine in your career, Kenny, if in this climate you prepare for a fight and everybody feels great and Keith is asymptomatic and he pops and so you can't fight? I just feel for Billy, and Frivola is such a good dude. He's not going to make him feel bad, but I just think for Billy this had to be a really tough few days to deal with this.
Absolutely. He must feel, terrible about it. And I think the big thing on that is that, if you do have it and you're not showing symptoms, they still haven't confirmed, and the experts still don't know whether you can actually give it to someone or not. It seems like you can't, But obviously the UFC taking the right precautions, just making sure that, Matt and everybody else around Billy is safe. And it's unfortunate, man. These fighters put in so much work to get ready for a fight, especially during these crazy times. And to get all the way to fight week and not be able to compete, it's a tough one for everybody involved.
And I gotta say, the other thing is, man, then you got to get quarantined for another 2 weeks. I'd lose my shit at that point.
Yeah.
If I decide to go back, and this type of shit drives me nuts. I mean, I definitely can't afford to be hanging out anywhere for 2 weeks for sure.
Right.
And I guess the thing to do is to get tested right before you go, even wherever you're living, just so you know that you're negative, so that doesn't happen.
Right.
And I guess the other thing is don't travel with your corner man. Everybody just split up. So because I'm saying if he's not with Billy Q, he's fighting.
Right.
Most likely, I think. I think the fact that he was traveling with him as one of his corners, that was the problem. I think. I don't even know, but yeah. Hats off to the UFC for error on the side of
UFC
safety. Also,
UFC's done a great job. UFC's done a great
huge.
job here in Vegas, man. I'm telling you. I mean, it's so buttoned up. I'm still here. Everybody has left. All the new fighters are going to come in tomorrow. It is a ghost town right now. It's a little bit eerie being here at the host hotel by myself. Hey, Ray, speaking of losing your shit, are you keeping your shit together these days? Because for me, things have changed. Like my wife's going crazy at home with 3 kids, but now I've had the chance to leave 3 times, extendedly every time. How are you doing in terms of the day-to-day, just dealing with the limitations?
No, I think, look, I'm honestly at this point, I just go down to the gym by myself, me and another person. So I get my workouts in. We're very, very safe. Anything, I have a face shield. If I do anything with anybody, I put the face shield on. So I'm kind of getting back to normal. It looks like the beginning of July we're opening up. So we're we're cleaning the gym. We had that service come in to clean the whole gym out for the COVID, and which was a nice service. Somebody actually donated to us. And that's it. I'm doing pretty good. I feel like I'm kind of back to normal. I got a bicycle, so I started riding. You know what I mean?
You look good. I mean, when you get a haircut, it's going to look like you lost like 7 pounds, too. You look good.
I think that's what I'm looking for. I think that's the exact effect I'm looking for, John.
That's why I shave my head every 4 days.
All right. Black T-shirts and haircuts, Ray. That's the key.
I like it. I think that's what I'm down to now. That's the way I lose weight. Black T-shirts and haircuts.
A couple other performances I want to get to. And with Bobby Green's win over Clay Guida, there's a lot to unpack when it comes to the fight, but I think a lot of people are focusing, and rightfully so, on his powerful post-fight interview with Heidi Androl when he brought in his father figure, Jacob Benny, who's his head coach and has done so much for him. So first I'll say, I'm happy that the judges saw that fight for Bobby Green, because I did too. He had 1 win since 2014, despite recent performances against guys like Drakkar Klose and Francisco Trinaldo that were actually very good, and he was not rewarded for. So a big night for Bobby Green, and an emotional, powerful message coming out of King Green after the fact, Ray.
Yeah, listen, man, I love Clay Guida. I think he's a class act. Always liked him. Got a great family. I've met his mom and dad, and he's just a good dude. But Bobby Green, I think, after watching his post-fight speech, he had to win that fight, because that was the time to deliver that speech. And as much as I like Clay and everything, I think it was great that he won. And I only met Bobby once. Seems like a cool dude, but I'll always be a fan of his now. I thought he knocked it out of the park, bringing in his father, who was white, in a time like this where it looks like somebody's trying to just divide us as much as possible. This was a great, great thing, and it's really that simple, man. There's good people out there. It has nothing to do with color. I don't want to get in. I'm not going to go off on a rant on this, but I was so taken back when I saw Bobby Green and his dad in there. I was like, wow, this is really good. And it's that simple, man, because I'll tell you, you go to CNN or Fox, you will get your brain scrambled listening to these people bullshitting and lying. You don't know what's true, but that's true. That's real. That was real, and I think I will always be a fan of that guy moving forward. I mean, not that I wasn't before. I only met him once. He seemed like a good guy, but I got to tell you, I thought he knocked it out of the park, and I thought he made a statement that everybody could learn from, man.
Yeah, Bobby Green's the fucking man. Like, if you don't know his backstory, you may want to go Google him, right? Foster care, bouncing in and around, no great support system. You know, I believe right now he has 3 kids with 3 different women, and he's navigating that whole circumstance as well. But his oldest son, Jeremiah, was the impetus for his fighting career, and now the guy's got 25 pro wins. But he's just a really good dude, and was really happy for him. Speaking of good dudes, Ray and Kenny, how about Jim Miller? I do want to get Kenny's thoughts on Roosevelt Roberts' maybe grappling shortcomings defensively in the fight, of course, because I know Kenny watches the grappling as intimately as anybody. But how about fucking Jim Miller? 35 UFC fights. He's never fought for the belt, but I think you're going to have no choice but to put the guy in the Hall of Fame. Top 3 in terms of wins, and seems to have found a good recipe, Ray, with medication and supplements to combat the Lyme disease. He looks better than ever.
I mean, I don't know where to start, Kenny, but I got to tell you, hats off to Jim Miller. That guy's a fucking legend. He really is. And he's an unknown legend. He doesn't, I don't think, get really like the way we're talking about him now. I think it should be done more. But obviously, if you ever met him, just a down-to-earth, grassroots type of guy. And, man, I tell you, it looks like, again, that Lyme disease was no joke. But he looks like he's got that beat. He's in a great spot. He's getting up there in age, but I'm going to tell you something, man. He took out a young guy that's an up-and-comer, or at least a guy who thought he himself was an up-and-comer.
Right.
And he kind of made that look easy. And, man, I got to tell you, man, I don't even know where to start with him. I think, like, again, he's one of those guys that doesn't get the credit that he's really due. I mean, I don't think there's any stop in sight for him. That didn't look like it for me. And he'll fight he's fought everybody. So he's
literally fought everybody in that division. Kenny, you picked him as a plus 200 underdog. It was a 4-point hit for you in our main event challenge. Your thoughts on Miller, and if you got anything on Roberts in defeat, we'll take that as well.
You know, Jim Miller is one of those guys who was most dangerous when you underestimate him. And he's been around forever. He is always a threat on the ground. And the way that he matched up against Roberts, I thought, was why I picked him. I thought that he was the better grappler. I thought that Roosevelt Roberts is a decent striker, but he's not one of those guys that really is going to be that big of a threat against someone like Jim Miller. Jim Miller has so much experience and, dealing with everything that he's dealt with, coming back from all that adversity that he's dealt with in his life. I just felt like the time was now, and Jim was able to pull it off. He's an absolute treasure. He's one of those guys that has done things the right way. And people aren't talking about Jim Miller because Jim Miller doesn't talk about Jim Miller. Right. He goes out there and he fights. It doesn't matter. Win or lose, he gives 100%. How can you not love someone like Jim Miller? It was awesome to see him get the win.
Well, really well said. And I got to tell you, he looks great. And he's been in some big fights. He's been in some wars. This guy looks awesome. What is he, 36 now? I think he's 36, 37. I mean, he looks phenomenal. He's just like, and again, Kenny, you hit on something which I love. You don't hear about him because he doesn't talk about himself. Unlike Roosevelt Roberts, who does talk about himself a lot. So I think that'll be a learning lesson for him. I mean, every time the guy wins a fight, he calls out Frivola. I don't even get it. Like, what do you got, Matt? Frivola doesn't say a word about anything. I never see the guy on social media. Doesn't talk shit. This guy, every time he wins a fight, he's looking for Matt Frivola.
It is interesting that's always the name on the
now maybe thinking about Frivola, you overlooked Jim Miller, and you got your arm snapped. And he got it snapped, too, because I don't even think I don't know. I mean, that
was slick.
Good. Yeah, that was slick. Yeah. He got his arm hurt, for sure.
All right, last thing, Ray, before I let you go, and certainly we want to get Ken Flo's thoughts on this as well. The first fight of the night, Max Rohskopf, undefeated at 5-0, making his UFC debut on short notice, taking on Austin Hubbard, far more UFC tested, far more experience, comes from a great camp, Elevation Fight Team. So I think most of the people who are listening to this podcast know what happened at the end of the second round. Rohskopf told his chief corner, Robert Drysdale, that he was done. And Robert, I thought did a really good job, Kenny and Ray, if I'm being honest. I thought he was patient. I thought his tone was effective. I thought he didn't overreact right away. I thought Drysdale was collected and trying to maintain the mental of his athlete, who seemingly would regret this half an hour later, right? And I think he was trying to keep him in the fight. I mean, there's so many different angles to this. I'm going to try to set it up as efficiently as possible. But because there was no crowd, Ray, Mark Smith, the referee, was able to hear this interaction between coach and fighter. So he went over, asked Rohskopf if he wanted to continue. Max said no, and the doctor was there, and they called off the fight. Now, this isn't comparative to a lot of recent situations involving Anthony Smith and Tony Ferguson where guys were taking an absolute beating. But there's a lot to unpack here, Ray. What was your thought on Drysdale in the corner and overall what he should or shouldn't have done in that situation?
No, I think Drysdale did the right thing. Look, the thing everybody has to understand, there's a relationship between a fighter, right, and his coach. So we don't know what that relationship is. You know, I got to tell you, 5 fights, really not a lot of fights. So, you know, I don't know if you really know the guy yet. And they probably never hit adversity like that. But that was a big platform to throw that kid into. That's the first thing. You know what I mean? After 5 fights. If you're not a special guy, that could be a big mistake. But I thought Drysdale handled it. But we don't know the relationship. We don't know if he's done that to him in sparring. We don't know if this guy's felt like quitting before. We don't know if we could trust what he says. Does he, you know, get out of workouts? Because say my leg hurts and, you know, It doesn't. You know what I mean? We don't really know a lot of stuff. But I think that kid made it pretty evident and pretty clear that he wanted out of that fight. I mean, and look, if he would have said, look, I broke my shin, I can't walk, I'm out, everybody's fine. You know, I think he maybe needed to express himself maybe a little more and say, look, man, I'm having a panic attack. The anxiety's overwhelming. I can't go out there. I'm frozen, you know, something. And I think everybody, you know, would empathize with what he was going through. But it's definitely a shitty position for both guys, I think. Like, again, Drysdale didn't seem like he, you know, like what I look for in those things, Kenny, is the corner guy invested in himself or the fighter? You know what I mean? Like, does he not want to look bad?
Right.
Or is it all about the fighter? And I thought Drysdale did a good job. He seemed like he was caring.
Yeah.
He wanted to give the guy just enough opportunities. You're sure, you know, like, so I thought he did the right job. But at the end of the day, the fighter really made that call and just, you know, he wasn't even being persuaded one iota of whatever anybody was saying. He wanted out of there. And I hope the guy's all right because, again, that was a big platform to be thrown into. And we don't know where he was. Only 2 guys know, him and his trainer.
Kenny, very quickly, I just want to provide a little bit of background, and then I'll let you have as much time as you want. So Rohskopf was about a 2-1 favorite over Austin Hubbard, had a lot of height. He had a very challenging upbringing. He was an ACC wrestling champion at NC State. So there certainly are some chops, right? Some wrestling chops, but obviously didn't have a lot of UFC experience, Kenny. The other thing I just want to say before I pass the baton, you've seen some journalists like Luke Thomas come out and just talk about just plain and simply a corner man's obligation to protect a fighter. We've heard the Nevada State Athletic Commission might investigate Robert Drysdale for maybe a lack of protection here, even though I would vehemently defend his actions. Overall thoughts on what we saw in the first fight of the night?
Yeah, I'm glad you brought up Luke Thomas. I think Luke is a smart guy, and not all fights you can't treat all of those instances the same. And typically I'm always going to lean towards the fighter. If the fighter doesn't want to fight, okay, that's fine. But who knows that fighter better than anybody else? The coach. And just like Ray said, that relationship is huge. You've seen this guy in the gym. You've seen the guy out of the gym. You know his mentality. You know what he can do. And let's look at the fight itself. For me, I don't care what the judges said. I thought Max won that first round, okay? He got him on the ground. He had him in some situations where it looked like he was close to a submission. He had him in that saddle position with both legs tied up, didn't finish properly. Okay, whatever. He won that first round, in my opinion. The second round, he definitely lost. There was a combination. There was a 1-2 that looked like it hurt Max at one point. A couple other shots that were decent. But was he getting absolutely murdered? I mean, was he just like getting rocked, getting knocked down repeatedly, couldn't see out of his eyes, was limping or any way, shape, or form? No, I didn't see that. Now, that doesn't mean he wasn't hurt. But now we also have to go back to the corner instances, that exchange with Robert Drysdale. He didn't say that he was hurt. He didn't say that he couldn't see. He didn't say that he was dizzy. He didn't say that he was limping. To me, that was a mental issue. That was a mental hurdle that he needed to get over. And what did Robert Drysdale do? He tried to get him out of that. He tried to say, hey, listen, man, you can do this. You go out there, you take him down, you relax on the takedowns, control the position. Don't go nuts trying to submit him like a crazy man like you did in the first round. You know, that's probably what should have been said. But he said, listen, you go out, you take him down, you win the fight. You know, because, again, I thought he won the round one as well.
Right.
So I think this is a kid who is talented. And a lot of times when you have talent and you beat a bunch of people up in the gym and you're 5-0 and you're having these easy fights, you don't know what it's like to encounter that kind of adversity. And he experienced that for the first time in the UFC.
Right.
In the UFC. And now there's some other, talk about the fact that he might have had an injury heading into this fight. So he hasn't really encountered much adversity as far as in the cage. Okay? It was his 6th fight overall. He may have had an injury. He took the fight on 5 or 10 days notice or something or whatever it was. That's not a whole lot of time. That's a lot to deal with being a young fighter coming into this. And a lot of times, we think we do a lot of good in telling people, hey, you're going to be the next thing and you're the prodigy and you're amazing and you're the greatest thing to ever come into this gym. And you build them up. And now, they have this false sense of security. They think they're invincible. And then they experience that and they go, oh, shit, maybe I'm not the thing. Maybe I'm not this talented guy that I'm supposed to deal with. So I thought Drysdale did the right thing. Now, on the 8th, 9th time that your fighter is telling you he wants to give up, maybe you should let go. Because at this point, this is when you find out if that kid's a fighter or not. I'm not saying he isn't. Right? Because he could still come back and go, hey, listen, I made a mistake. I am a fighter. I know I could get through this. I just didn't experience that before. Okay, that's a different story. Yeah. Whether he can come back from this, I don't know. I don't know Max, right? Drysdale knows him better than anybody who's making any of these assessments in the media. So I think that's on Drysdale to do that. If I know a fighter's just kind of a little bit of a quitter, he's got talent, but he doesn't have the heart, I'm going to say, hey, you know what? You're done. Maybe this isn't for you. But if you've seen him in the gym and you know what he's capable of and you've seen him come back, and you know what he's dealt with in his life or whatever, you got to push your fighter on. That's also your job. Yes, you're as a cornerman, you want to protect your fighter, but also your job is to buoy your fighter and give him the confidence to keep going on. So you can't ignore that.
Yep.
Yeah. And
hey, Ray.
You bring up a good thing, Kenny, too. I'm going to tell you something. Honestly, I didn't see the second round, but I was confused. I just went back and looked at the stuff in the corner, but that first round, he unequivocally won. To me,
I thought so too.
Yeah. I thought he was dominating that round. When I heard he was down 2, I wasn't even sure they were talking about the same fight.
Right.
Because I hadn't seen the second round. So I agree with everything Kenny says. I really do.
The judges were off, by the way. Just to go back on a complete different tangent. The judges were off that night. Yeah, no, he did not lose that round.
That first round.
No way.
Fucking way. 100%.
So he did say on the stool, this kid hits hard. And I do think he intimated this isn't for me, or I don't want to do this. So it will be interesting to see if Max Rohskopf resumes his career, because I think he will. And I do think he has a lot to offer and he has potential. And I think he can realize success. But yeah, I do believe that there are a lot of people out there trying to simplify what is inherently a pretty complicated issue. And however you feel about Robin Black, I would encourage you to go seek out his YouTube video, because he has studied the brain extensively. And Ken Flo takes a scientific approach to a lot of these conversations as well. And sometimes it really is just a matter of trying to get your athlete over the mental hurdle. And I'll be honest with you, when I was outside fucking running this morning, at altitude in the Vegas heat, I was thinking about that a little bit. Like, can you push yourself a little bit more, you fucking pussy? And I quit right in that moment. I decided.
Running is not for you, John.
Yeah,
it's simple.
Right.
All right. Hey, Ray, always good to see you, my man. And unless you got anything else, we're going to make some picks for Poirier and Hooker. Who do you like this weekend, Dustin and Dan Hooker, huh?
Woo. Oh, man, that's a really tough fight.
I think so, too.
I think I'm leaning towards Hooker in that fight.
A lean towards the underdog. All right, at Ray Longo MMA.
What kind of underdog is he, John?
He's like plus 180 or so. I think the line is wider than it should be. So, all right, my man, Ray Longo MMA on Instagram. Appreciate your time as always, sir. We'll talk to you next Monday, okay?
All right, guys. Thanks for everything. Enjoy.